Today we learn how to multiply integers, and I think you're going to find out it's much easier than adding or subtracting integers. There's just not as many things that we have to keep straight. The main thing you got to be able to do is multiply numbers, all right, because we're still not going to use a calculator on these. So the first thing that I want to give you is just a couple. In this case, it does help to have a couple of rules. All right, when we did adding and subtracting integers, we didn't do rules because they just, I think, make things complicated. But here, it does help us. Rule number one, a negative times a negative is a positive. Is a positive. Okay? A negative times a negative is a positive. If we are multiplying, now please keep this straight in your mind. We are now multiplying and dividing. Okay? So when we do multiplication, you have to keep that straight from adding and subtracting. All right? And I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. The second rule, let's skip a line or two because I want to kind of add something below each rule. A negative times a negative is a positive. The other rule is that if I have one of each in any order, a negative times a positive, or vice versa, a positive times a negative. Okay? One of each. A negative times a positive is a negative. Always. That's why I said in this case, rules are good. Okay? They're not good with adding and subtracting integers, and I'll show you why. Let's look at this first rule. All right? If I were to do a negative times a negative, like negative 8 times negative 8. We'll just do that one. Negative 8 times negative 8 is just positive 64. It's that easy. We don't have to use a number line. We don't have to draw holes. We can just say negative 8 times negative 8 is 64. But what I want to get straight right now, I want you to make sure you don't get this confused with this. Don't try to apply this new rule to this situation. What is the answer to this one with the arrow? Negative 16. Okay, this is negative 16. You cannot use that rule with adding and subtracting integers. All right? That's why I'm making a big point about keep these rules only with multiplying and dividing. All right? Number two is kind of the same thing. A negative times a positive, like negative 7 times 5. A negative times a positive is a negative. That'd be negative 35. All right? But what if I had negative 5 plus 7? Negative 5 plus 7, isn't that positive 2? All right? So that's why I say you have to keep the two separated. All right? These rules only apply to when we're multiplying, and then we'll find out they also apply to when we're dividing. So let's do a few examples. You're going to be asked to find the product. We don't have to do a whole bunch of examples because these are pretty straightforward. Let's say we have this one. Now the first thing you got to get straight is the way they write some of these problems. When they write that negative 7 and then a parentheses around the negative 4 with nothing in between, that means multiplication. All right, so what's negative 7 times negative 4? positive 28. Let's do another one. 8 times negative 6. A positive times a negative is a negative. So then you just do 8 times 6, right? So this is going to be negative 48. If I have one of each in any order, it's always going to be negative. Okay? Just trust it. That's the way it is. How about this one? They're going to throw these in to see if you're still awake. Isn't that just a regular old 4 times 5? So isn't that just regular old 20? Okay, don't let those confuse you. What is any number times 0? 0. It doesn't matter what integer you multiply by 0. It could be 189 million. If it's multiplied by 0, it's 0. Okay? Let me give you a few to try on your own now. We'll call these class examples. 5, 6, and 7. Try these on your own. Go ahead and try those 3 without my help. All right, I think I saw a lot of good things. The first one is positive 22, a negative times a negative. The second one is a positive times a negative, so it's going to be negative 32. Number 7, the answer is going to be positive, but you may have to come over to the side someplace and do your multiplication since we're not using a calculator tonight. 0, 0, put a 0, 6, 2. It's 260, and it's a positive 260. Now, they're also going to give you some problems tonight, and I really want you to pay attention on this because a lot of people will make mistakes. If they're going to make a mistake on this assignment, they're going to do it on this next section. So pay attention here. Evaluate when m equals 5, n equals negative 8, and r equals negative 7. So this is one of those situations where they want you to plug in the number. All right? And it might seem, pretty easy, but people mess it up all the time. Let's take a look at it. What if I have negative nm? Now, don't get ahead of me. If they just write nm, that means multiplication. All right? But there's something else you need to know. This little negative out in front, you need to treat it just like you're multiplying negative 1 times the m and the n. All right? Treat that as a negative 1. Now, what is n? N was negative 8. So it's negative 1 times negative 8 times m is just 5. And that's how you need to treat that problem. That little negative out in front is just a negative 1. Now let's do the multiplication. What is negative 1 times negative 8? 8. 8 times 5 is 40. All right, let's do another one. How about n to the third power? Now look what we've got. My n is negative 8. So what I'm doing is I'm raising negative 8 to the third power. Now don't get in a hurry and say, oh, that's negative 24. It's not negative 24. This is negative 8 times negative 8 times negative 8. And don't try to do that in your head. Write it out. Because if you try to do that in your head, you'll probably make a mistake. Now look what I've got here. When I multiply negative 8 times negative 8, don't I get positive 64? So now I have positive 64 times a negative 8. So I know my answer is going to have a negative sign. Right? Now you just need to go over to the side someplace and do your multiplication. 64 times 8. 8 times 4 is 32. Carry your 3. 48 plus 3 is 51. It's negative 512. Okay? How about this one? Negative r. Well, what did I tell you a minute ago? Treat that negative out in front like a negative 1. Negative 1 times, what was r? It was negative 7, so this is negative 1 times negative 7, which is positive 7. All right? Now, they're also going to give you some where they say find x mentally. We had these in our last section. This is another example. And they'll give you something like this. 8 in parentheses, negative x equals negative 24. Something like that. So you have to figure out what you put in for x that would make that true. Is it going to be 3 or negative 3? It's going to be positive 3. If I would have put in a negative 3 here, well, this is like a negative 1, right? So negative 1 times negative 3 would be positive 3, and then 8 times 3 is positive 24, which is not what we want. So the answer is 3. Okay? A couple of you said 3 the first time. You were correct. All right? Let's do one more of those, and then we'll stop for the day. Negative 7x equals 35. What would x have to be to make that true? This one's a little bit easier, isn't it? Just regular old negative 5. Okay? And we will stop there for today.